Satellite 35956, a 300-kilogram Starlink V2 Mini. On December 17th, its argon hull thruster propulsion tank began venting at 418 kilometers altitude. Within hours, tracking data showed the semi-major axis had decayed by 4 kilometers, a drop that should take months of controlled drag, not a single afternoon. The satellite is now tumbling, shedding low-velocity debris fragments as it spirals toward a re-entry window measured in weeks, not years. SpaceX has quietly pushed software patches to over 7,000 sibling satellites. The press release called it routine operations. The orbital mechanics tell a different story. This failure pattern, pressurized propellant venting causing uncontrolled attitude loss, mirrors the 1978 Solwind incident, which scattered over 300 trackable fragments and forced NASA to rewrite its debris mitigation standards from scratch. Today, we're pulling the tracking data and the regulatory filings to understand what a single thruster failure means for a constellation of 9,000. Let's get into it. The tech press keeps calling these small satellites. At 300 kilograms dry mass, a V2 Mini is heavier than Sputnik 2 by a factor of 6. This is industrial infrastructure. The V2 Mini runs on argon Hall effect thrusters, electric propulsion systems producing just 0.1 newtons per engine. That's roughly the force of holding a single AA battery. What you lose in thrust, you gain in efficiency. Higher specific impulse means more maneuvering with less propellant mass. The trade-off is time. You can't dodge debris on short notice. Every maneuver is a slow burn planned weeks in advance. The argon is stored in pressurized tanks integrated directly into the satellite bus. This saves mass, but means any seal breach vents directly into the spacecraft's core systems. And that's exactly what happened. This wasn't a combustion event. Hall thrusters don't combust. This was a pressure vessel failure causing uncontrolled gas release. The propellant that should have lasted years escaped in hours, and once that happened, the satellite lost attitude control entirely. This failure mode has been documented since NASA's CERT program ran from 1964 to 1970. 60 years of electric propulsion heritage, and we're still solving the same problems. 4 kilometers of semi-major axis decay in a single event. That's significant uncontrolled delta phi. A nominal Starlink deorbit maneuver moves the satellite 10 to 15 kilometers over a month. Satellite 35956 covered a third of that in hours. The debris characterization confirms this wasn't structural breakup. High-velocity fragmentation produces distinctive radar signatures, fragments spreading rapidly on individual ballistic trajectories. What tracking networks recorded was low-velocity debris release, consistent with gas venting and thermal blanket material shaken loose by the attitude change. The primary structure remains intact. It's tumbling, but it's not in pieces. Current status: 418 kilometers altitude, no attitude control, no propulsion capability. Perigee decay models suggest complete re-entry within weeks. But here's what matters. Within 48 hours, SpaceX deployed a software patch across more than 7,000 active Starlink satellites. No other space operator has executed fleet-wide software deployment at that scale or speed. The question is, what did the patch fix? SpaceX hasn't disclosed the root cause: valve logic error, pressure sensor fault, thermal management issue. All we know is they identified something serious enough to warrant immediate intervention. That speed is impressive. It's also a reminder of the architecture. 9,000 satellites, one code base. If a fix can propagate to 7,000 spacecraft in 48 hours, so can a bug. The heritage contrast is Gemini's VIII, March 1966. A stuck thruster sent Armstrong and Scott into an uncontrolled roll, 1 revolution per second, before Armstrong disconnected from the Agena and used the re-entry system to stabilize. The difference? Armstrong was in the loop. He could override the automation. Satellite 35956 had no such option. Here's my question for the comments. Hall thrusters trade thrust for efficiency. At 0.1 newtons, you can't abort a debris collision on short notice. For a constellation of 9,000 in congested orbital space, is that an acceptable trade-off? Let me know. 300 fragments. That's what NORAD cataloged after the 1978 Solwind incident. One satellite, 300 pieces. Some are still up there. The phrase Kessler syndrome gets thrown around like a light switch. One bad day, and LEO is unusable. That's not how orbital mechanics works. It's a gradient. Risk accumulates until probability curves cross a threshold that makes certain shells economically unviable. Solwind forced the development of modern debris cataloging, the same infrastructure the 18th Space Defense Squadron uses today to monitor over 47,000 objects. By 1983, NASA had formalized debris mitigation standards after shuttle astronauts returned with paint flecks embedded in their windows. The agency realized orbital space was cluttered and getting worse. The uncomfortable math: collision probability doesn't scale linearly with object count. Double the satellites, you more than double conjunction events. Right now, 9,300 Starlink satellites represent approximately 60% of all operational spacecraft in low Earth orbit. One company, 60%. 25 years. That was the original NASA deorbit guideline from 1983. In 2022, the FCC tightened it to 5 years. Here's the thing. Starlink already overcomplies. V2 minis can deorbit in weeks. The problem is, the rules assume isolated failures. NASA STD 8719-14 doesn't contemplate systemic failure modes, what happens when a software bug affects an entire constellation. By every individual metric, 35956 is a success story. The framework doesn't have a category for, we had to emergency patch 7,000 spacecraft because we found a flaw we didn't know existed. The Heritage Parallel isn't a debris event. It's NASA's post-Columbia inspection culture. The agency developed Inspect What You Fly protocols requiring physical verification of every thermal protection component. SpaceX operates differently: patch and monitor. Launch cadence makes individual verification impossible. They compensate with fleet-wide updates and statistical quality control. It's not worse. It's different. The regulatory framework hasn't caught up. If you want to understand how we got from Apollo's manual overrides to autonomous fleet management, we've done a full breakdown on the sister channel. Link in the description. $10 million. That's the maximum FCC fine under 47 CFR 97.105 for debris violations. For SpaceX, that's one Falcon 9-second stage, less than a busy month's fuel bill. The economics don't align. The FCC has never issued a major fine against an operational LEO constellation. Meanwhile, Amazon's Kuiper team, with 3,200 satellites in their pipeline, uses every Starlink anomaly in regulatory filings to argue for tighter licensing. They're not wrong about safety concerns, but let's be clear. This is spectrum warfare. Every compliance requirement imposed retroactively on SpaceX is one Kuiper can design for from the start. For context, the 1978 Solwind debris faced zero financial penalty. The regulatory framework is a post-shuttle invention built reactively, rather than designed proactively. 9,300 Starlink satellites. Space Force tracks 47,000 objects total. One company represents 20% of the catalog. The narrative frames Space Force is monitoring Starlink. The reality is dependency. SpaceX provides ephemeris data directly, because military tracking can't keep pace with autonomous maneuvers. A tumbling satellite like 35956, unpredictable trajectory, no station keeping, degrades conjunction models for every object in that shell. NASA's ISS assessments now routinely include Starlink proximity calculations. The station has maneuvered multiple times. The NORAD displays from the 1970s were designed to track dozens of objects. The infrastructure was never designed for mega constellation density. 42,000. That's SpaceX's licensed ceiling. They're at 9,300. Current cadence puts them at 20,000 by late 2026. The connecting the unconnected narrative is real, but not where revenue growth comes from. Government and enterprise contracts, defense, aviation, maritime, now exceed consumer growth. The business model is institutional. The humanitarian narrative is marketing. Collision probability scales non-linearly. Doubling satellites more than doubles conjunction events. Expect FCC and ITU tightening on debris bonds within 12 to 18 months, and propulsion anomalies will recur. At 9,000 satellites, fleet-wide failure modes are statistical certainty. The shuttle program promised airline-like operations. Reality was 4 to 6 missions per year. Constellation economics face similar constraints. Here's the engineering reality. Satellite 35956 will re-enter within weeks. The debris field is contained. Immediate risk is low. But the systemic question remains unanswered. SpaceX has built an architecture that assumes propulsion failures are isolated events. The software patch proves they know that's not true. 9,000 satellites, one code base, one vendor. We've never operated at this scale. And the rules we're using were written for a different era. That's the descent path. I'll see you on the next one.